Above my computer in my office here at work is a picture, a painting actually, that has guided me and been a friend to me for many years. It is by Rembrandt, a Dutch painter, and therefore it is mostly dark with light shining on the figures in the middle. The figures come alive and the rest of the painting is in shadows. There is a father and a son with another son looking on. The painting is of the return of the prodigal son as he is being embraced by his loving father. The painting celebrates the unconditional love that the parent has for the child, and in the painting you see wide arms holding on to a kneeling child. This painting reminds me always, as I stare into it, of my own status as beloved in the heart of the Creator. Many have said that this is the heart of the gospel. If we would say anything about the gospel in a few short words, we would be able to say, we know we are beloved of God, and we are always being welcomed into the arms of our Creator. But if this is the story told by Jesus about God's love, then I think that the story of the Good Samaritan is the story of the outcome of that love and what we are called to do because we experience unconditional love through God in our lives. It is the immediate impact story of our faith. The Samaritan acted, I believe, with passion, with strength, with intelligence, in a situation where others acted with self-protection, fear, and even a cold heartlessness. The story is all the more compelling to me because no one expected the Good Samaritan to act in this way. He was an outsider. He was a foreigner. This was not his place, not his home. They were not his people. And most likely, if the story had been reversed and he had been the beaten-up one, no one would have found him and helped him on the side of the road. Where does it come from? Where does compassion come from? That kind of compassion in action that we hear in the story, that ability to care beyond ourselves for someone else, the desire to show up in people's lives in real, tangible, and powerful ways. Mother Teresa has said that we often feel that what we are doing for others is just a drop in the ocean. But then she goes on and she says, but if that drop was not in the ocean would be less because of that one single drop. We can make a difference as a single person, as a community, as God's people. Think for a moment. What do you believe you have to give to the world? What brings you joy? What is it, as you look at the world, that you simply cannot stand, you cannot bear it another moment to see it happening? I wonder if the Good Samaritan had already answered all of these questions, and so acting immediately and without hesitation was really easy. He'd already figured out that compassion and action is what the world required of him. So perhaps someone along the road, someone along the way of his life had shown compassion to him. So he knew that he could have the courage then to give and share that compassion with others. For many years, Dan Apra was a minister and a member of this congregation. Before he came to us, he had spent really a whole lifetime in ministry. He'd been a pastor in many other places in the country, and he had served several congregations and many hundreds of people. He was, I think, for many folks, a wise, beloved, and powerful pastoral figure. He created a special service in his ministry that he presided over through the years, an agape meal that was often shared in a circle together with others. as bread and cup passed by. He simply reminded folks that Jesus was willing to disrupt his life for others. Jesus was willing to disrupt his life for others. Now, Dan suggested we could carry on in Jesus' tradition and be willing to disrupt our lives for someone else. To be willing to disrupt your life, interrupt your life for another. Henry Nouwen, the Dutch priest and spiritual pathfinder, said it this way: compassion is being able and willing to see the world with soft eyes. Instead of closing our eyes and walking to the other side of the street, or hardening our eyes and looking away, how might we look at the world? How might we look at others with soft eyes, being willing to be impacted by what we see and becoming to be willing to have an impact as a result? While I was working on this sermon, and things happen like this in all of our lives, my favorite hermitess walked into the office. Some of you know her as Sister Michaela of Sky Farm. She said, "You're telling the story of the Good Samaritan? Let me tell you a story." In the grocery store this week, she said, in Whole Foods, an old man came in wheeling his wife in a reclining wheelchair. You could see immediately that both were very frail and vulnerable, and certainly took up a lot of aisle space as they moved through the store. She said people were almost diving to get out of the way so they wouldn't get hit. But a little girl in the fruit section, maybe 4 or 5 years old, came up to them, looked straight at the old man and said, "What's the matter with your mother?" The old man said, "What? What?" Not in a mean way. He just couldn't hear her. So she said it again. "What's the matter with your mother?" And he just shook his head. He couldn't hear her, and he was ready to move on. And the little girl looked at him and looked at his wife in the wheelchair, and undaunted by the man's frustration, she simply moved to the wheelchair, looked at the woman, and lifted her hand. That was all. That's a Good Samaritan. To see the world with soft eyes, to act and to be available in compassion, to be able to simply move out of your life to care for another. Start small. Begin with a prayer that you might move and be moved in both your head and your heart, and to begin to see the world with soft eyes. Perhaps for one day, simply jot down the soft eye moments in your life when you felt the compassion that God has for you moving within you as you move out toward others. Then talk about it. Talk it up in your family, or in your dorm room, or in your dining room, on your dining room table, or in a cafe with a friend. Make a decision. Decide you want to do something. Maybe save the Bay cleanup on September 15, or take a new friend to Camp Cazadero for the weekend, or decide to give something away. To the Cellar thrift shop would be my choice, because I know when I give it away to the Cellar thrift shop, it makes a difference in the world in at least 3 or 4 or 5 different ways. Or you could go on a need hunt. Stop by the youth homeless shelter on University Avenue to volunteer, or call the local food bank to listen to some of the statistics about food needs in the East Bay. That will move you to action. Or call the university and discover who came there without a lot of financial or personal support, and make a decision you'd like to help. The opportunities to help are as endless as the incredible longings and needs of our world. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Walking into the adventure of compassion can be scary, risky, even frightening. You never know what's going to happen. You're absolutely right. For some of us, it might demand a real change in the way we organize our life. It might mean that we begin with a single step, desiring to be more tolerant instead of intolerant and impatient. For others, it might mean that we take on the impossible, beginning to believe that the impossible can be done, like starting an AIDS ministry or working with each other to eliminate hunger and poverty in the world. Step out of fear. That's all you need to do, and into action. Big or little, dramatic or subtle, Jesus is saying in the story of the Good Samaritan that we can make a difference if we think about who our neighbor is and where our neighborhoods exist. Walking into the adventure of compassion is risky. It is. It's scary. It's even frightening. But it is within us to be able to do so. It's in our DNA to be a compassionate people. Years ago, I had what I would call a mountaintop Samaritan experience. Looking back on it, I might not do this again because I think it might be too dangerous these days. I was a campus minister at San Francisco State and walking down a street in San Francisco getting ready to get my hair cut. I saw 3 men walking down the other side of the street towards me, and I knew them as students at San Francisco State, where I was the campus pastor. As I was walking along, these 3 men moved into the street, and they began in the middle of the street to fight with each other. 1 punch, 2 punch, and the 3rd guy was actually shoved onto the trunk of a car where he bounced and he hit it hard and was stuck there. Then another man began to run, and the other one chased him up the street as they got into a fist fight right in the middle of the street. Still no cops. Without thinking, and it wasn't very smart, I stepped into the street and I attached myself to the back of one of the aggressors. And I told him that I would not let go until he stopped fighting. And he turned and looked at me and he said, "Okay, lady, okay, I'll stop." And he stopped. And I stayed there with them, chatting, until the cops came. Like I said, doing something terribly risky is scary, and I might not do this again today, but just as I was remembering that story, I turned on the TV. It was Friday night, and on the local news channel it says, "Good Samaritan." And here's a story about a 22-year-old woman who broke up a fight on the streets of Oakland on Thursday night. It's in all of us. We are God's beloved. All of us are born to be good. All of us are born to take risks for each other. It's in every one of us. It's part of our calling as followers of Jesus along the way. So find a way today to see the world with soft eyes. Find a way to take a small step. For me, the little girl's question is a profound one. What's the matter? Start there. Amen.